Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of a new show that we have started. It's called Lions Do Not Bow. You can call this the debut or the pilot episode. We're testing everything out today. I will be hosting this show. My name is Nathaniel Pawlowski. I'm the son of Pastor Artur Pawlowski, who you see. I'm a law student. I'm 25 years old, and me and my father will be trying to speak regularly, hopefully at least once a week, to address you and to talk about a variety of topics, including politics, the Bible, current events, culture, society, what's going on with trends, and a plethora of other subjects. I hope to do this show regularly, and I hope to keep it not very long because I've realized that people's attention span has shrunk incredibly. So we want to get you the important things to address you and to do it in not a rambling rant style monologue, but in a conversation to really flush out important ideas, thoughts, and hopefully this show can be encouraging, entertaining, enlightening, informative, and hopefully it'll be powerful for you. So I don't know if you've ever watched my dad do interviews or do different shows, but he has a tendency to monologue or to ramble a lot. And my goal is going to be actually to cut him off a lot and to really focus in on what I think is really important and what you need to hear. And I want to be that person that's going to like try to flush out his ideas and to articulate it as best as possible for you. And that entails me cutting him off a lot. So I'm sure he's going to love that. But I think it's important. So we want to discuss these topics. And if you want to get involved, then comment down below what you would like us to talk about. If there's anything that you want us to talk about or address, comment it, and I will be reading the comments, and we can decide if that's important, if we need to discuss that. So get involved in our discussion, and please comment. So for next time, we'll be talking about different things. It'll be a surprise. But I'll be putting on sources. I'll be putting on videos, pictures to go along with this show so that it's not just dry talking, but actually getting you involved and engaged, because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in the world, and I want to leave you guys encouraged and empowered, and hopefully this goes well. So since this is our first episode, I really just want to introduce ourselves. And my goal in this is so that you understand who my father is, Artur Pawlowski, from not just my perspective, from just a different light, because he's not the man that media portrays him or that sometimes even videos portray him. And I think it's important to understand who he is, what he does, because he does so much that it gets drowned out a lot, because there's always so much going on. You hear about arrests and tickets and tours and everything that's going on, politics, and it's just a lot. So I just want to slow it down and kind of try to understand who he is, what he does, and I'll turn it over to my dad. So please explain to us kind of who you are, what you do, what you've been doing for the last 20-25 years, and just tell everybody why you do what you do.
Well, good to see you, Nathaniel. It's awesome that we will be doing this together. I mean, life is an adventure. It's very interesting, and a lot of things are going on in life. That's why someone that is doing a lot has a lot to say. So, if you intend to cut me off, it's going to be really, really interesting. And I don't mind at all. I mean, if you are thinking that we're going off the topic, well, then so be it. Let's go back to that narrow road of the discussion. Well, who is Artur Pawlowski? I mean, that is a very easy thing to answer. I am a father, a husband, a very passionate Christian. I actually do read the Bible and I actually believe in the Bible. I mean, from the very beginning to the very end. And that's why I am very passionate about the Word of God, because I know what's coming. I've seen it, of course, what happens to a nation when a nation kicks God out. It's lawlessness, and it's very troubling, not just for the villains, but also, not just for the victims, but also for the villains. I mean, in the end of the day, the history is teaching us that in the end of the day of every totalitarian regime, everyone suffers. So I'm very passionate about letting people know what we immigrants are
So,
coming
so, so,
from.
so to that point, you say that you've seen this before, that you grew. Where did you grow up, and what exactly did you see?
Well, I grew up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the Soviets in a very peculiar country, Poland. Why is this a peculiar country? Because this happened to us many times. So Polish history of Poland is history of resistance and fighting for freedom. So I grew up hearing the stories from my grandparents about what the Nazis did to Poland and to Europe, and then eventually to the whole world. And then the after effects of the Nazi regime, how they pillaged and destroyed such a beautiful country that
So
Poland
you so you
was.
grew up so you grew up in the 80s, 70s, 80s. Your grandparents grew up in Nazi Germany, in Nazi Poland, Nazi occupied Poland. And then that later translated to the Russians taking over after the Nazis lost the war. What specifically did you see that makes you so passionate?
When people ask me about our experience behind the Iron Curtain, I mean, the one word that always comes to my mind is hell. Living under a totalitarian regime is hell. It's not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, a level of corruption that I think most people have never experienced or ever. Even I don't think they have even a big imagination to understand what we're talking about. Growing up under the boots of the Soviets is a show trials, a lawlessness, a lack of accountability. Growing up under communism and socialism is
So
chasing after necessities of life
so
every day.
specifically, what are things you saw? I wanna hear actual things that you saw, whether it was secondhand through, friends you had or your parents' friends. What kind of stories can you actually tell me about, what the KGB did, or how your family was in danger, or food shortages, crises, workers' union strikes, civil disobedience? I want specific stories of things you observed or things that you saw going on around you.
Well, in the 70s, I was still a kid. There was always never ending struggle to get necessities of life. I mean, for the Western mind, what I'm going to say, it's craziness. It's total, you know, unbelievable craziness. Imagine going to a Walmart or Safeway or Costco, and the only thing you see on the shelves is tens of thousands of nothing, tens of thousands of um, bottles of alcohol and nothing else. No butter, no sugar, no coffee, just vinegar and vodka everywhere. I mean, and at times, even I remember you were not even able to buy vodka, because I remember everyone, the whole neighborhoods going around and buying from illegal people. So imagine standing in the lineups, never ending lineups. Once a week, my mom would send me to buy a loaf of bread, and you could only buy one loaf of bread for the family. And the lineup was so big, you could not see the end of it. Imagine going to a store and the only thing you see again is vinegar or vodka and nothing else. So that's why the whole population was
I
constantly.
would say that it's starting to look like that. Um, I think people have forgotten what those shortages look like just a couple of years ago, when you went to a store and people were panicked and they were buying things and people were off the shelves. Things were off the shelves because people were so panicked. And I think it's naive to say that that can't happen again, because it just takes one act of fear, one act of panic, and one act of totalitarian grip on the nation. And we saw that a couple years ago, and you grew up in this environment. So
But
um
not only that, I mean, even if you walked into a store and you could buy something else, let's say they dropped something in the store and uh, you saw it on the shelves, you couldn't just go and buy it, even if you had the money, because it was the government that was allocating, how much sugar you can buy a month, how much Polish sausage you can buy a month. It's just as ridiculous as this sounds. You couldn't just go and say, okay, I want to buy 5 kilos of beef. I want to buy 5 kilos of pork or whatever else you wanted to buy. It was the government that was giving you little pieces of paper on top of your money that you had to present to
food
those that were
stamps.
selling the food stamps. But more than that, if you had money, you couldn't buy anything without the food stamp. And the government was telling you how much a month you can buy it. You couldn't just go to a gas station and say, okay, fill my tank. No, 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 no. I don't remember ever seeing anyone legally filling their tanks. It was 5 liters, 10 liters, 15 liters, and that's it. And I saw people buying and selling at the black market. People were stealing. I mean, what the communists and socialists did, they turned the entire nation into people that, to survive, had to take something back. So I don't want to call it, it turned them into thieves, because the government was stealing everything from the people. The people were just trying to take back what was rightfully there. So it's a never-ending struggle, Nathaniel. That's what communism is. Actually, that's what every totalitarian regime is. It's a never-ending, every single day struggle to survive. On top of that, so now think about it. Your mind every single day is where I'm going to get the next meal, where I'm going to buy a pair of jeans which cost a month's salary in Poland. So my mom had to go to work for an entire month just to be able to buy. You know, she would not she would not be able to spend a penny during that month to be able to buy one pair of jeans. But on top of that, you always have to understand that on top of struggling, going after the necessities of life, you had the government on your toes. You had to be careful what you're saying. You had to be careful what you're watching. You could go to prison, Nathaniel. Imagine this. I mean, the Western mind cannot understand what I'm saying. Imagine that it happened, you walked into a room or you visited your friends and they had a radio on. And if that radio was, if they were listening to European radio that was not approved by the Communist Party, you could go to prison for 5 years, of course, after you were tortured by the police. So I've
I
seen
mean,
police beating
I can
people.
actually, in fact, imagine it, because now, although it's not the same forum, it's not radio. If you use social media in a way that goes against what the government dictates, then you can go to prison, and you see that frequently in the United Kingdom. You do see that in the United States and in Canada. However, the UK is like prime example of exactly that. You say the
It's
wrong thing on social media, or you're associated with the wrong people on social media, and you can be doxxed. You can be actually arrested. You can be imprisoned in the United Kingdom for that. There have been cases already.
And I was told that 30 people a day are being arrested in UK for a social post. 30 people a day. It's quite fascinating, because I remember when I was growing up, England, for us, behind the Iron Curtain, was viewed as the beacon of freedom, liberty. I remember that a dream for the Polish person was to escape to France or to escape to England, because England was viewed as this a stronghold of liberties. And of course, the ultimate goal was always to go to United States or to Canada. Canada, it was very interesting because United States was always this liberty and freedom idea. Canada was this El Dorado, this milk and honey, this land that you smell maple syrup,
So,
if you will.
we've got a little bit off topic. Um, I want to hear about specific stories that you encountered in a communist country, a communist occupied country of, I'm studying law, so I'm very interested in this, how the law was used specifically, in stories you like, in either lived experience or people you knew, stories you heard about other people in the neighborhood, or in the community, where the law was used in a lawless way, so to speak. If you know what I'm getting at, how was law enforcement? How was the law of the land, the judges, the court system, the police, the marshal? How were they used? The agencies, the KGB. How are they used specifically to suppress people, to harm people, and to prevent anyone from rising up?
Well, first of all, to answer this, we have to let the people know that Poland had a constitution. And that's very important. Why? Because we are witnessing a repetition of history. So Poland implemented constitution a few years, I think it was 2 years after the United States of America. So Poland, the highest law in the land was Polish constitution. Polish people were electing kings. So liberty, freedom, you know, constitution was very
In
important to
in
the
in the
Polish.
1500s, 1600s, when Poland was a monarchy, they were electing kings, is what you were saying. It was not a lineage of monarchs of, my son will be king and his son will be king and his son will be king. It was a constitutional monarchy.
Well, at the beginning, it was, son would take over the throne, but in 1800s, that changed, and Polish people were electing kings when the constitution was implemented. But why is this important? Because when the Nazis attacked Poland, Poland had a constitution, but of course, tyrants, dictators do not care about your Bill of Rights. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about constitution. When the Soviets took over, we still had our constitution, which was the highest law of the land. It was the highest law, and they were supposed to follow the highest law of the land, constitution. However, tyrants do not care. So when I was growing up, your typical justice system, in quote, the way it was working was, they had this famous saying. I remember like it was yesterday. The police officers would say, "Give us a man, and we'll find something on that man." I think Beria.
Meaning, 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 and that saying means, essentially translated, that even if there was an innocent citizen that had never broken any laws, not so much as a parking violation, they will find something in their black little book to put this person away. They will
Yeah,
find
either
they'll invent things to put that person away.
yeah, either true or imaginary. That was from Beria under Stalinism. They had this idea that we can find guilty anyone, and they did. I mean, millions of Russians were slaughtered, sent to gulags, and the Polish people as well, and many others, because they were considered a threat to the tyrants. I mean, anyone that spoke against. And every ism, whatever that ism is, operates the same way. It's us and them, and if you are against them, they will find something against you. And that's exactly what I observed. I remember the police officers walking around, and if you look the wrong way, if you said the wrong thing, or if they wanted you for whatever, or if you were on their way, for them to achieve whatever they wanted, well, they could use that against you, and they can make stuff up. I remember hearing the stories. Of course, I was a kid in the 70s, but I remember older people telling me that when they arrest you under under the communism and socialism boot, you were always tortured first. So you were beaten first. And that was just a standard. You get arrested, you get the beating. And the beating was very severe. I remember on television, because they were doing those show trials, and that's why I refer to what we're witnessing in Canada right now and in some parts of the United States. They're not just regular trials, they are show trials. What that even means? Well, it means that the accused is already guilty before he even enters the courtroom. And I see this right now in Canada all the time. Political dissidents, Christians are already guilty. Everything else, everything you see is a show for the public. So how did that look? I remember they brought this guy in a stretcher. He had broken legs, broken arms, fingernails taken, black face, and the judge had to ask him, by law, had to ask him what happened to him. And he was not able to talk, but his lawyer said that he tripped coming to the court. And that was good enough for the judge. I mean, the explanation, of course, was clear and it was obvious, right, that he tripped and that's why he's on a stretcher. And they would move on. So every evidence, or if you had evidence of your innocence and the government already decided that you must be found guilty, like in my case, the government decided that Artur Pawlowski, that has become a symbol of resistance, a symbol of freedom, must be found guilty. Well, the truth is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The judge was ordered, was told, just like, that's why I wrote the book, because Nathaniel, in a book, I'm telling people about the political fixers. As you remember, they told me that the judge,
So,
Gordon Trinke, is paid.
so back to communist Poland, and I'm going to ask kind of a nasty question, and it's because the truth and history should not care about who looks good. It's about the truth. It's about what actually happened historically. And I want to ask you, because you lived through it, you saw this. Did the Polish people, bureaucrats or people that wanted to just get by, did they participate in the Soviet takeover of Poland, in holding the Polish people captive? Did Polish people themselves, did they participate? Were there Polish people as officers enforcing on behalf of the Soviets? Were there Polish judges enforcing on behalf of the Soviets? Were there people, regular people, Polish people that were technically also enslaved, participating in the communism and the socialism and in the tyranny?
100%, many directly and many indirectly because of fear. You have to understand, Nathaniel, terror. You have to understand fear. The country and their people, the people of Poland, were terrorized with the gun. I mean, this was not a joke. It was not, okay, I'm going to give you a bylaw ticket. Those people that, if they refuse to participate in this, they would end up in prison themselves. And many of them that refused to cooperate or work for the Soviets were murdered. I mean, tens of thousands of Polish people, good patriots, were murdered. And that's the same thing that happened to the German people. And that's why I said so many times, hundreds of times, that the first victims of the Nazi regime were not the Poles, were not the Jews. The first victims of the Nazi party were the good German people, actually hundreds of thousands of them, not just thousands, hundreds of thousands of German people in the 30s were slaughtered. Dachau was not built for the Poles. Dachau was not built for the Jews, or Buchenwald or other German concentration camps. They were built for the good German people, actually German people that love their country, and they saw Adolf Hitler as the biggest threat to the German people. So they were slaughtered, murdered. You got to remember, 250,000 disabled people were slaughtered by the Nazi party before the war started. The first gas chamber, it was not invented in Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was actually in hospitals. So what we are witnessing right now, and
Which
of
is
course,
you saw the eugenics program, which, I mean, we could talk about all day how that's been repackaged and that actually exists. I mean, just Iceland is one example. They have 0 Down syndrome people in the country of Iceland, but that's because they aborted every single Down syndrome baby. But that's a side point. But
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that these patterns repeat, and that's why I'm bringing this up, because you grew up under something, and I want to get us back to who you are, why you're doing what you're doing. You grew up in an environment that was communism. It was tyranny. It was oppression. It was what you refer to as hell. It was a hell on earth for you and for other Polish people. Obviously, the people that were participating in it, they had a good time, and you can make the reference that
Actually, no,
certain.
Nathaniel. Actually, the thing is, that's what is very fascinating, historically speaking. They only had a very short-lived good time because, in the end of the day, tyranny is afraid of itself. It's like a snake that is eating itself.
like
Eventually,
like the movie The Death of Stalin. I think it portrayed in a comedic way kind of the paranoia and the reality of living in a regime like that. Like, take North Korea right now. If
fear.
anybody if anybody steps out of line, they're dead, their family is dead, their descendants are dead, and all of their friends are dead. And that system of fear does cripple people, absolutely.
But it
um
cripples everyone, and this is the thing, and this is why I am so, Nathaniel, passionate about what we're witnessing right now, because in the end of the day, everyone suffers, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the victims and the villains. In the end of the day, your children, your grandchildren, everyone pays the price. You see, Poland, when it was taken over by the Soviets, did not have many young men left because of the slaughter from the Nazis and Warsaw Uprising, hundreds of thousands of people, millions. I think it was 12 million Polish people that perished during the Second War. So Poland was very vulnerable. We didn't have enough manpower to fend off the Soviet disease, the invasion of the Soviets, the Red Army. So they took over and they implemented their bosses, their military and the police overseeing the Polish people. And the Polish people were told, listen, you can end up in a gulag, you can end up in Siberia, you can end up in prison, or you can assist us, you can work for us, and you will be greatly rewarded. But even that was a lie, because in the end of the day, again, those people that collaborated with the regime end up hurting as well, and their children and their grandchildren end up being
that
hurt.
is absolutely a paradox of tyranny, and you see that in modern regimes. I mean, where's Gaddafi today? Where's Bin Laden today? Where's whatever Kim was in charge of North Korea before him? They also suffered. They also suffer, and that's why you feel bad for the people that are doing this today. And you have this kind of inward righteous anger. But on the other hand, you feel bad for them. You feel sorry for them. But
But
coming back
let's go,
to
let's go back to Poland, and I really want to touch on propaganda, because I have been brutal, if you will, with the so-called mainstream machinery. Why? Because one of the aspects that those tyrants could literally get away with murder was the support of the mainstream media. It was the media that was communicating a message to people like me growing up behind the Iron Curtain that communism is the best system that was ever invented, that we are
But
living in paradise.
you're saying it's not the best system? Because in school, I learned something very different. So are you sure? Because on
Yeah, because
paper, I've learned that on paper, this is a brilliant idea that works
be-
100% of the time. Just look at the Amish. Like this
yeah,
this this works. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, just because every country that's done this in practice has failed and actually decimated their own nation doesn't mean anything, because on paper these Harvard eggheads say that it works.
yeah, because they have an agenda, Nathaniel. You have to understand that they have an agenda, and their agenda is outlined for you and for me in open. They are telling you will own nothing and you will be happy, while they are flying their private jets to Davos, while they are eating the best steaks that they are. Those people are telling you will walk or you will ride a bicycle to save the earth, right? While at the same time they're polluting left and right, flying private jets and driving SUVs, because it's all a facade. It's a show. Again, we're going back to the show trials. We're going back to the political theater. And that's exactly what those people are. It reminds me of Ceausescu. I don't know if you remember who Ceausescu was. I remember him very well because, of course, he was our brother from Romania. My grandma, so you great grandma, was from that region. She was a Polish lady. However, she grew up in the modern day Romania. So she was telling me stories from that era. I remember Ceausescu. When I was growing up, he was eventually shot for the crimes against humanity. But I remember when the when the U.S. came to Romania to visit how wonderful communism and socialism is. And Nathaniel, you would not believe it, that they could not even master enough food, enough fruits, enough vegetables, enough meat to show the reporters from the West how wealthy communism and socialism really is. So
I
what
mean,
Ceausescu,
North Korea does that today too. When the reporters come, they fill the stands in the stores that have their open windows with food, and it's super blessed. Meanwhile, the dissidents, the people that have actually escaped, tell you the truth, and it's vastly different. But back then, they couldn't even muster enough fruits and vegetables to
but
put on a cart to show the Western media that they actually had enough to feed their country.
But Ceausescu did something a lot more, and it's a widely documented story. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to believe me that I'm telling you the truth. You can Google it up and find out for yourself what he ordered, because he could not get enough food for the reporters to see. So he ordered people to make apples, cucumbers, and tomatoes and steaks from wood that was painted. So the reporters were not allowed to touch anything, because those craftsmen did all of that from wood that was painted. So it looked amazingly real, but it was made out of wood. That's what communism and socialism does. Also, remember, every day, Nathaniel, 8 o'clock, if I remember correctly, was I think it was 7:30 or 8 p.m., where they were having their propaganda. Every night they would they would be on television telling you how wonderful the nation is doing, that we are the strongest, we are the richest, and they would play propaganda how bad is in Canada, how bad is in England, how bad is in United States of America. They would be showing the black people rioting. They would be showing poverty somewhere, who knows where, and they would show the rich communists in our neighborhoods, in quote, there's full stores with wooden stuff that is painted, and they would show that to us, and we knew the truth, and they would compare that to how bad it is in the United States of America. I mean, imagine you could only watch a movie once a week. And I remember that because Saturday evening they would play an American movie, of course, only a movie that was not saying anything negative about the communism and socialism. It was highly screened. The propaganda made sure that we're not watching anything that is not proper. And it was once a week. Imagine 10 minutes a day, only 10 minutes a day, 7 p.m. 7 p.m. You could watch cartoons. And that's why I have a very soft spot for cartoons, because when I was growing up, we couldn't just watch cartoons, for an hour or two, only 10 minutes.
So
So
I
I
just wanted to
remember.
so I just wanted to say, if people are interested in kind of a little bit a glimpse of what you grew up into, they can read your book, Lions Do Not Bow. It's on pathwaybookservice.com, amazon.com, or amazon.ca if you're in Canada. But you can order the book and read it to actually understand kind of where you're coming from, what you grew up under, because I do recall that you talk a little bit about that and some of the stories. Like I want to mention one interesting story about great grandma. Actually, she was the one in Romania who was hiding from unspeakable horrors that were being done. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've heard stories from both of my grandparents. One were subjected to the cruelty of the Nazis. So they were telling me things that the Nazis did from 39 to 45. Another grandma uh, escaped Romania with our great uncle. He was a Polish soldier, and they were caught by the Russians and taken to the police station. And it was a great uncle that lowered her with a rope and they escaped to Poland. But she was telling me about what the Soviets did to the Romanian people. And it was, I'm quoting, she said the Russians, when they came, they pillaged and destroyed everything that they saw and they raped everyone. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter to them how young was the girl or how old was the girl. That's why they were running, because it was like savages that came. And that's what the totalitarian regime
And
does to
she
you.
was actually hiding under the bed when something like that was happening. Is that correct?
So that was your second grandma, that she was hiding under the bed when the a Nazi SS was raping another girl on top of her. So she was under the mattress hiding while this man was raping her friend. And those are common stories. I mean, throughout the war, 39 to 45, what the Germans did, and
And
of
then
course, what
another relative of ours actually escaped Siberia. He was captured by the Soviets and he actually escaped. It took him what, a
yeah,
year to escape from
great
Siberia?
grandfather was taken to Siberia, and it took him, if I remember correctly, 2 years to come back to Poland. One year for sure. I think it was 2 years to come back to
So
Poland.
I'm saying these little stories not just to illustrate what these totalitarian regimes were like, but to illustrate what our family has gone through generation after generation, what happened. And part of it is obviously because you're Polish, we're Polish, and that was just the geographical location that we come from, and that was just the reality. Pillaged on both sides. However, it's just I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe in accidents. I believe that we come from a line of generation after generation of people that have stood up to tyranny, have fought tyranny, have been struggling with it, and that takes different forms: fascism and
Yeah.
socialism slash communism. You could say that some people say that they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. I believe that's slightly inaccurate historically. However, both sides of the coin have been heavily impactful on our family and our struggle. And that's what I'm trying to get to. And to wrap it up with this part of the story is that you come from a place and a time where you were struggling with communism, you were struggling against this. That was the reality you grew up in. And our family struggled through many other things with the Nazis, with the Soviets. Before that, I'm sure it was Vikings, Romans, everything,
Mongolians, Ottoman Empire.
Mongolians, the Ottoman Empire, everything in between.
Yeah.
However, what I'm trying to get to is that this is this is where you grew up. This is how you were shaped as a person. And then something happened. You escaped. And that's the next part that I want to get to and focus in on is you escaped. Why did you escape? And really get into the truth, be honest, the history of it. Why did you escape? What was going on? And then explain the shift to Canada. Walk through that.
Well, it's a very long story. In the
It's a short
70s,
story.
in the 70s and 80s, I grew up in that environment, seeing the craziness of communism and socialism, where your tomorrow was not looking bright. The government was deciding where you go to school. The government was deciding if you will get a job. The government was deciding everything for you. If you were not part of the Communist Party, you were in trouble. You were you're not going to make it according to them if you're not part of the system, the regime. And I was asking myself this question quite often for a number of years. Why the new regime? Why the soft, put it this way, totalitarian regime in Canada hates me so much. Why they're so afraid of Artur Pawlowski? And it finally hit me because not only I've tasted hell, but I also tasted the remedy. And I think that's why they're afraid of me, because with my own eyes, I have seen the power of the people. So, yes, it's true. We grew up under the boots of a totalitarian regime, hopelessness, hell, really, really bad, fighting for necessities of life every single day, standing in a never ending lineups. I mean, my childhood is a never ending lineup, or seeing lineups all the time, everywhere, everywhere. I don't care what you throw at me. I don't care what you can go and get in your Costco. We didn't have it, and we had to stand in a never-ending lineups. I remember my mom came home. I was already from school, and she said, "Art, you got to go and change your father because there is a rumor that the coffee is going to come in 3 days." In
So
three
so he was
days,
so he would be standing in line. You would change with him to stand in line for another long expanse of time, and then someone would change with you, and you would just keep changing so that 3 days worth of waiting in a line
and three
for
nights,
coffee, three days and nights for coffee
just
that
for
we
one
have
kilo. Family
that
was allowed.
we have in abundance under capitalism.
Yeah.
Communism was telling you capitalism is evil, but to get one bag of coffee, 1 kilo of coffee, you had to wait 3 days in a lineup,
If you
3
were
days
lucky,
and 2 nights.
if you were highly blessed, because many people that stood in a lineup did not get any, because there was a limited amount of coffee that would come to that store. And I
Well,
shared that.
I can't imagine why you left then. This sounds like paradise.
As children, I remember the first time I saw a store in a capitalism, when we escaped into Greece, and I walked into that store and I just looked at it. I could not believe it. I mean, they had 50 different types of chocolate. For a guy like me, for a kid that grew up seeing a chocolate once a year, twice if I was blessed for Christmas and for birthday. And if it happened that that chocolate had peanuts, I would break those little bars, leak the chocolate around the peanut, and I would save the peanut for the next day. So when I looked into that first store in Greece, I just looked at it and I looked at it and I said, I can't believe it what I'm seeing, that there is actually a place where a kid can go in and choose a chocolate he wants. I mean, Westerners cannot understand what we're saying. This is like so crazy. It's like
So,
science
so,
fiction,
so
science
now,
movie.
why is it that you went to Greece exactly, and just quickly tell them how that process happened? Like how did you escape, and why did you escape?
So in the AD, Polish people, there was a Polish uprising, and Polish people tried it before. It was 56 that they sparked the fire, which actually kindled the revolution in Hungary. And Hungary got freed. Poland was smacked by the Soviets, because we are neighbors to the Soviet Empire at that time. So it took 2 years for the Hungarians to free themselves. Polish people lost. Then 79 came. Polish people took it to the streets. Many were shot dead. And of course, they took it to the streets because they were living in paradise and they just were bored of watching Netflix. So they took it to the streets, right? No, it was desperation. Their children were suffering. There was no hope, no future. It didn't matter how long you work, you were always behind. Imagine an environment that you're working a whole year to buy a TV. By the time you have enough money, the price went 5 times more because of inflation. I remember, Nathaniel, going to a store today and buying book for $10, let's say. Tomorrow, the next day would be $20. Next week, $100, and following week, $1,000. I remember buying stuff, going to a store. So imagine this scenario: you go to a store and you buy whatever you can buy. It didn't matter if you need it or not. You bought it because you could barter with. You bought it because tomorrow it's going to be more expensive, and that way you will preserve your buying power. That's insanity, but that's exactly what communism and socialism does. So in the 80s, finally Polish people had enough and enough. Enough is enough. They took it to the streets by the millions, and I saw this with my wife, with
This was
our
in
own eyes.
89.
It was no, it was 1980. 1980, Polish people, under the banner of the Solidarity movement, took it to the streets,
But
and they
this was not one event. This took years.
it took 9 years for the liberation of Poland.
When
You see,
80 and 89 is when it collapsed.
yes. So here is what people do not understand, why I am so crazy passionate and vocal about what we're witnessing right now, because it's easy to destroy. It's very easy to destroy a nation. It takes time, but it's relatively easy. It's a controlled demolition, but it's extremely difficult, and it takes decades and generations sometimes to rebuild what was so quickly destroyed. That's what I'm saying. What I'm witnessing right now in front of my eyes is a controlled demolition of a very beautiful society. And to rebuild this, I know from experience, it's going to take generations if we don't stop those monsters from doing it. So, 1980, Polish people take it to the streets. Some were shot dead, tens of thousands arrested, but they did not stop. 81, 82, they fight. The government enacts martial law, tanks on the streets, fire, machine guns, uh, police everywhere. We got actually arrested. Me and your grandma and my brother, your uncle David, we got picked up by the police because we were caught going to your great grandma, um, after the police, after I think it was 7 p.m.
Curfew.
where curfew. You were not allowed to be on the streets. We were caught, and thank God that those people were not aggressive, and they realized it's a woman with two kids. My brother
So
David.
why not earlier? Yet there were some attempts of the Polish people to uprise before, and those attempts failed. However, by the millions, they didn't until
No,
1980.
they did. They did a few times, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, but they were brutally squashed, destroyed, and some were shot
But
dead.
the masses that finally worked didn't happen until the 80s, where that
But why?
mass group of people.
But why?
And here's but well, that's what I want to ask is, did it take a point of complete and utter desperation where they have nothing left to lose? Did they have too much to lose before, and that's why not enough people did? Why did it take so long, and why didn't they do it early? And this is important because when you're talking about today, why it's so important to do it earlier, because I believe if they did it earlier, not as many people would have gotten hurt or arrested or have been killed if they did it earlier. It's
You,
always better to do something earlier than later. And just historically speaking, they would have been successful if they did it by the numbers that they did in 80. But was it a lack of desperation or too much to lose? Still, even with the little that they had, was it still too much fear, too much to lose?
I know it was a number of things. It was um, fear, of course. Terror was one, but also the nation was divided. The society was divided, and the tyrants are very good at this idea. Divide and conquer. They divided the society into the blue collars and the white collars. And in '65, when the working people took it to the streets, the university students and the intelligentsia, if you will, refused to back them up. They didn't want to join them. They didn't want to help. So the working people,
Sounds
the
familiar.
workers, took it to the streets, and they were brutally attacked by the police and soldiers. And like I said, some were murdered on the streets, others were arrested, and the whole thing collapsed. In the '70s, you've got a different story. It was the intelligentsia and the university students took it to the streets, and they asked the workers to join them. But the workers were bitter and angry because they didn't help them few years before, and they said, no, you didn't help us few years before, we're not going to help you this time. And you know what happened? Because that's history. The intelligentsia and the universities, the students.
Intelligentsia, meaning the people that were educated, They were higher up a little bit in society when it came to work, so like doctors, lawyers,
That's
etc.
right. And professors, university students. It was hundreds of thousands of students that took it to the streets. It was a beautiful uprising. It was amazing. I remember that watching this unfolding. But they were pleading with the workers. And I remember that as well. They were saying, come and help us this time. We made a mistake. We acknowledge that we made a mistake not helping you a few years before. Please help us now. And they refused. So everything, it was a very similar situation. Some students were shot dead. Others were arrested. Actually, thousands upon thousands of people end up in prison for years of imprisonment. Of course, again, you got to remember, imprisonment was not just going to prison. Imprisonment meant torture. You were tortured every single time. Every arrest was beating,
And
torture.
your family would be at risk. Your family would then be on a list of people to watch out for, or they would also be hurt.
That's right. I mean, you were blacklisted if you were part of that. If your husband or your wife was caught or your son was caught in this uprising, the whole family was hurting. Parents would not be able to find jobs, or they would be fired from jobs. And I mean, you are in a nation without the ability to work. I mean, you were already living in poverty. Now you
So, so
can't
these
even
first, so
buy.
these first couple uprisings failed for a number of reasons. One of which being the major one, which is lack of unity and lack of numbers. But then take us to what did work, and then what happened after.
So desperation was always from 1945. Polish people were desperate enough, but again, divide and conquer, and still a lots of people were working for the regime. They were part of the regime. Actually, believe it or not, I know it's hard to understand this or believe, at least from my perspective, that there were a lot of Polish people that were actually communists. They were socialists. They actually believed in this utopia, but of course, history proved them wrong. So 1980 comes, Nathaniel, and suddenly everyone, including the regime people, had enough of this craziness. The country was in ruins. I mean, think about it. We're talking about 1980s, where the war was already over for decades, and you still had bullet holes in the apartment buildings that we were living. I mean, think about
This
it.
is 45 years ago. This is not 200 years ago. This is not 1,000 years
No.
ago. This is not 2,000 years ago. This is not biblical things that we're talking about. This is 45 years ago.
And they were still bullet holes. I remember them. We were growing up in a neighborhood that they were bullet holes from the Nazi era, and the Polish people did not have enough money to fix. I mean, to fix things, you need cement. To fix things, you need bricks. And we had nothing. Nothing. They were actually demolishing historical buildings to build apartments for the people because we had nothing. Lots of historical monuments were destroyed by the communists and the socialists to pretend that economy is doing well, and we're building those high rises. And high rises I'm talking about in quote because they were just six
Yeah,
story.
if you've been to Eastern Europe or you've seen pictures, it's the most depressing architecture I
Yeah.
think in all of human history. Like it is so sad. Even if you look at, countries now, or there's still remnants in Poland, in Romania, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, Moldova. It's sad to see this architecture. But
It's
just
boxes. It's boxes. Why?
fast forward to what happened with this uprising, and what you observed, and what led to you actually leaving and escaping to Greece.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Let me just address this depression in architecture, because what happened was the communists and socialists, they wanted to create a society that everyone is equal. So rat house for everyone, identical, dark, brown, shadow, depressing, just like you said, box, 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 box. So they were building those apartments like boxes, which I mean, it was giving you depression, and lots of people were suicidal, drinking vodka all the time because you couldn't just live, you were just existing. So in the 80, Polish people took to the streets. It took them 3 years. They kept coming, they kept fighting, and they did it the right thing. They did it together. For the first time, all the Poles finally came together, and they did it with God. So they used faith. They realized that they cannot do this alone, that they need the help of God. They need the church to come in. And I remember them singing hymns in front of the tanks and the soldiers with machine guns. I remember thousands. I mean, you can't even imagine 10,000, 20, 100,000 people, and everyone would go to their knees, crying and praying to God. I remember them chanting, "We want God, we want God," in front of the machine guns and the tanks.
And they were saying that because
Communism.
Christianity, communism replace the state always in a totalitarian regime. The state replaces God,
The
and when they're
state
chanting, "We
becomes
want,"
God. The state becomes God. And that's what you see in the West. The government wants to address every aspect of your life. It was is the government that you have to turn to for social, for faith, for economical, for everything. I mean, you got a problem, come to the, Uncle Sam, he's going to fix you up. Social security, all those different things, healthcare. The government becomes Pharaoh, which is considered God for the people. Whatever the Pharaoh says, that's a law. That's what you have to obey. And that's communism. That's every totalitarian regime. They always become gods for the people. Whatever they say, it goes. And communism and socialism outlawed faith. In other words, the faith, the organized faith, the state religion, if you will, was controlled by the communism. However, they cannot control this for forever. So the Polish people, their faith was rising up. People were learning about this mighty God. We had the Polish Pope, John Paul II. He was a freedom fighter. He grew up under the Nazi regime. He fought with the Nazis. I mean, he lived through the Nazi craziness. So he remembered everything, and he became a symbol. He fought with the communism and socialism, and he was giving people hope. That hope sparked the hearts of the masses. They took it to the streets, and they did it with a cross. They did it with sermons. They did it with masses. They would come together and they would face the machine guns, but they did it peacefully. No guns, no swords. They were not fighting the police. They were not fighting with the soldiers. They just, in a way, they went like a sheep to the slaughter, and it worked. It did work because the government didn't know what to do. If those people were fighting the regime, they would shoot them dead, and they would be justified for what they have done by destroying and killing and, arresting all those people. However, they did it peacefully. It was non-compliance. They paralyzed their system by refusal to cooperate, by refusal to work. It was a general strike. It started very small, it grew, and the whole country was completely paralyzed. And that was going on for a few years, and then the government started to back out of their regime, their different restrictions. They were easing them, and then eventually in 1989 the whole thing collapsed. Iron Curtain was broken, Berlin Wall fall. I remember I was there. I was on the other side of the Berlin Wall watching this whole thing unfolding. However, here's what happened right after in 1989. Very bad people took over post-communist countries. I'm talking about
and 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 the this is important, that communism doesn't just go away. The remnants of communism, the remnants of totalitarianism, authoritarianism, it stays. Um, it actually stayed. If that's like,
Yeah,
sorry,
the
my
same
camera.
people. The same people. You're messing with your camera with your fingers like this. You see, it's
AI,
a,
we're gonna get
it's a
taken over.
too smart camera. I don't have a fancy camera like Nathaniel. I just got a little tiny one. But you're absolutely right. what happened to Poland, and not just to Poland, post-communist countries, the Soviet Union that collapsed. Those people that were in power, yes, they gave up their political power, in quote, but they took over business. And the way they did it by force, by hiring ex-military people, by hiring KGB. I mean, think about it, Nathaniel. Right now on the global, stage, you have Vladimir Putin. But do you know who this guy really is? He was a head of KGB. He is from the communist era. I mean, the guy was trained by communism and socialism. So he was tasked by dealing with mafia in post-communist country, in Russia. And how did he deal with mafia? Well, he shot the heads, and he did it publicly. He shot them dead. That's how he dealt with them. However, he didn't just shoot them. He sent a message to the rest of the bosses and say, "Hey, there is a new hancho in town. There is a new boss," and he literally took over mafia, prostitution, alcohol,
Gam-
drugs, gambling, all of it. Why? Why do you think within a very short period of time, Vladimir Putin became the richest man on earth at that time? Well, that's why he took over mafia enterprise, and because they already had the infrastructure. KGB and the very Polish version already had infrastructure in place. So they just copy paste the system that worked for the communism and socialism and implement it for their private businesses. That's what happened.
So a few things happened after the collapse of communism. There was extreme poverty. The remnants of these evil rulers still was in play, and then the mafia took over. So how did that affect your family, and your decision to leave?
So to do business, you had to work within the system. Well, to do business, to do anything, when I was growing up, you had to deal with corruption of communists. And I'm telling you, everyone was corrupted. Everyone was corrupted, from the police officers to the judges to the politicians to the doctors to the teachers. My driver's license, I mean, this might be a very controversial thing. I did pass. I drove, I learned, I did pass my driver's license, but I still had to give a liter of, so that would be 2 liters of vodka, but there was 1 liter of spirit to the teacher. Just how it was. I paid for the course. I paid for everything.
You
I
see that
did.
you see that in countries like Mexico, where like the
Yeah,
police will pull you over and not let you leave, demanding a bribe, and that's just how corrupt countries are run. They're run by through bribery, and
that's it.
it's a
Everything was
remnant. It's a remnant of a system of poverty and a system of elite people that are ruling over the masses, of like a totalitarian system.
everything was corrupted, and you had to have bribery. You couldn't just go to visit your grandma in a hospital. You had to bring a chocolate with you. You couldn't just go to a doctor and say, "Well, doctor, how is my mom doing? How is my brother doing? How is my sister doing? How is my uncle doing?" You had to have an envelope. Always envelope. I remember my parents always having envelopes with money, or the food stamps, or the gasoline stamps, or whatever else there was a commodity. I mean, I've seen people bribing people with toilet paper. I mean, as crazy as this is, toilet paper was a very important commodity
Well, we
to
learned that.
order.
We learned that little lesson in 2020, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I grew up in an environment like this, that you can just go to a store and buy toilet paper. There was a time I remember when I had to go and look for scraps of paper, because only then you could exchange, so many kilos. I don't remember right now how many kilos you needed to have of the scrap paper for a toilet paper. And when I've managed to do that, and I would come back home with a roll of toilet paper, it was like, wow, paradise just visited Pawlowski's home. Normally, you would take a piece of propaganda, you would take a newspaper, you would break it into, you would fold it into few, small places like this. You would cut it, and then you would start, folding it, because it was hard. You bomb would be caught, and you're folding it and you're stretching it, and then you're folding it again and you're stretching it. And if you did it about 100 times, it was soft enough that you or your bat would not be cut, literally cut, bleeding. And majority of Polish people, my wife doesn't like when I share the story because it's kind of gross, but majority of the Polish people had black bums. Why? Because of
The ink.
ink that was used in a propaganda newspapers. It was cheap ink, and when you were doing your thing with the propaganda paper, your bum was black because of ink. I mean, that's communism. That's socialism. So in '89 came, and finally my parents said, "You know what? Enough is enough." They fought the communists, my grandparents fought the Nazis, and they came to a point where there was a sliver of chance to escape, an opportunity to go to a relatively normal country. My father took it, and he escaped first. When the Polish government learned that my father escaped, they denied us 3 times. So your grandma, my brother David, and me, we applied for visa 3 times to go to Greece. 3 times they denied us, uh, uh, you know, the visa to leave the country. But that was a loophole. There was one way that the Polish people could escape, and that was when you were very rich, you could buy tickets to a big cruiser, a big boat, because the communist government believed that if you had so much money, you're not going to leave this El Dorado of communism and socialism. So my mom sold everything my parents worked for their entire life. They sold whatever they could, and she bought those 3 tickets for herself, for me, and for my brother David, your uncle. And that's how we escaped Poland. We went through Bulgaria, and then we went through Turkey, Istanbul, and then from
This,
Istanbul
this
we
was
went.
this was on a boat, and you literally tossed your clothes over the fence to get to that boat.
Yes, because we were caught. We were caught. The communist that was on a board watching us, because the communists always had a spy. If you were living
Control.
country, to control, to know what's going on, he somehow, maybe he overheard us, maybe uh, he just knew what is happening. He came to us and he says, "I know you're trying to escape. If you escape, I will be in trouble with the regime. Therefore, I'm going to lock you up in your rooms, and you're not going to live." And I said that we will jump through the to the water, to the sea. Of course, at that time I didn't know there are sharks everywhere there, but at this moment I didn't care. I'm telling you, if he would say that he's going with a plan to lock us up, we would jump. We would jump to the sea and swim to the shore. Thank God that didn't happen, but they were watching us. And you couldn't just take stuff and go crossing the border with your luggage. You couldn't do that because you would be turned away. You would be stopped. So what we did, we put many clothes on ourselves. So I would put my mom's clothes, I would put, my brother's clothes, or whatever I could put everywhere, stash it here and there, to cross multiple times the border. And we did. During the day we were just back and forth with stuff on ourselves, and the leftovers, when we saw an opportunity, we threw bags over the fence where our father, my father, David's father, was, your grandfather was waiting on the other side in Piraeus, in Athens. So that's how we escaped. I mean, it was an ordeal. It was not an easy thing. We were constantly monitored, and it was always a fear that we would be caught. And not only we would be caught and end up in trouble with the law, but remember, we've lost everything. My parents sold everything. Mom, because dad was already in Greece, sold everything. We had nothing to come back to. So this is the thing with immigrants, and the difference between immigrants and invaders is this: that we work very hard for what we have. We emigrated to either America or Canada or any other country to build
and
stuff,
and
to
there's
buy a house.
a value and appreciation for the country that you go to, not
That's
like
why.
some of
That's why.
these modern day immigrants or invaders, some call them. who have
I call
no
them invaders
appreciation. Y-
because this is exactly what we're witnessing. As you know, I have been hunted down by this new regime for a very long time, 20 years right now, and yet in front of my home, what do you have? You have a pole with the Canadian flag. Why? Because I love this country. I love what this country was offering when we came, which was freedom. It was a liberty. It was a new beginning. It was a land that I can work hard, build a house, plant a tree, and buy myself a dog and leave a legacy for my children and their children. That's immigration. I'm an immigrant. Now, what we're witnessing is an invasion. Invaders don't build, invaders burn stuff up, pillage, destroy, steal,
So,
rape.
you escaped communism on a boat. It was a very difficult thing to escape this regime. Uh,
Very difficult.
you
And you
lived
gotta just remember for the people to understand how difficult it was that your grandmother, so my wife, your mom's mother, was caught trying to escape Poland. You can't forget that. So your grandmother was caught by the communists trying to escape to Germany because she made a very big mistake. She forged documents, a passport, and went to say goodbye to her best friend. And it was her best friend that called the police. She was arrested, and your mother, so my wife, your mother, was born in communist prison. So your mom was born because grandma was pregnant at that time, was born in communist prison. And she spent her first 6 months of her life in prison because grandma, her mom, tried to escape communism. So it was not an easy thing. It was not
and
a
sometimes
small thing.
we're talking about your story today, but mom's story gets overlooked a lot. Your wife, my mom, she also participated in the solidarity movement. She was handing out pamphlets. In her backpack smuggling these
That's right.
pamphlets to recruit people for this movement. And she was born in prison. She also escaped to Greece, just like you did. You two met in Greece. Um, and I'm we need to fast forward a little bit because there's so much to talk about, and there's so much of the story that we need to talk about Canada, what happened in Canada. So you're in Greece right now. You escaped this system, very difficult to escape, but you're living in Greece. And what happened for you to immigrate to Canada?
Well, we have this Polish saying that from a rain to the gutter. I don't know how to translate this
Yeah,
into English, but
from the uh, frying pan into the fire.
well, there you go. We escaped totalitarian regime, a very corrupted system, failed system that destroyed Poland, impoverished people, hurt people, hopelessness, hell, depression, alcoholism. I mean, all those things are coming from that system. So we finally escaped. And again, Greece, Nathaniel, at that time, it was paradise. It was absolute paradise. It was so beautiful. It was so amazing. People were joyful. I've never seen more joy in my life than hanging around with the Greek people. They were just joyful people. So think
Pre
about it.
2008 Euro
In-
and the collapse.
yes, before they entered the European Union, um, in Poland, when you went to work and you work very very hard, you earned about $30 a month. In Greece, you made more a day. And when you made 30, $40 that was good enough. Listen to me. That was good enough for you to pay rent and eat in a restaurant every single day of the week. So you could work one day and you could enjoy your life for a week. So if you went to work 4 or 5 days, you had an entire month covered. So the Greek people were called at that time the richest people of the poorest country because the country was not rich, but the Greek people were extremely rich. if you know what I mean. Because
Yeah,
when they work,
the nation's GDP wasn't maybe so high, but people could afford enough to just live happy, fulfilled lives
very
because they
happy,
weren't struggling to get by.
very happy. In 5 years that we were living in Greece, I only saw one Greek person drunk, and yet they were drinking every day because the way they were drinking was with food, and for many hours they would sit in restaurants, and they were very happy people, very happy
Like
people.
the Jewish culture, which we see in the Bible. I mean, wedding could last up to a week, and you would be there would be plenty of wine. I mean, Jesus's first miracle, there was drinking going on, but not necessarily drunkenness
Yeah, you see, that's the difference between the Polish culture under communism and socialism and the Greek culture. They were not
under
depressed
capitalism.
under capitalism. So they work very hard, and that's true. Greek people did work very hard, but they also had their siestas, which is afternoon nap, and then the evening would come around 10 p.m. They would all go to restaurants and sit there until 1, 2 in the morning, and the next day it was absolutely amazing, and life was very good. However, it was also very corrupted. The police officers were corrupted, the government officials were corrupted. And you got to remember, I was a builder. I was building houses for the richest people on earth. I was renovating their summer vacation homes 50 kilometers from Athens. We were living in a tourist city called Agios Apostolios, which now I laugh at because a translation, it means the apostles, the saints. And I mean, right now it's kind of funny because I was not a believer at that time until I met your mother. She was a born again believer and she led me to the Lord. So I was doing very, very well. I always say to the people that our El Dorado was in Greece. I was making 30,000 drachmas, which was about 8 times more than your average salary, when I was working construction, when I was building houses, and sometimes I was making a lot more. So within 2 years, I made enough cash, enough money that I was able to buy myself a land and build a two-story a palace, a huge house overlooking the sea. So we were doing very, very well. My father had a business, my mom had a business, I had a business. David, my younger brother, was going to school in Athens. Life was good, but I had to hire workers and I had to hire immigrants. I had to hire Polish people. And in order to do that, Nathaniel, I had to bribe the police. I had to bribe the politicians. I was building houses in national parks, and I had to always have the envelope ready when the police was showing up. And that was just the system. And again, we just escaped another form of a totalitarianism, corrupted system. Yeah, now our lives was better financially. We could afford the chocolates, in quote. We could afford restaurants, and we had 3 cars at that time. We were doing good. We were living in a villa, a beautiful next to the sea. It was just a beautiful life. However, it was still a corrupted way of earning.
There was no freedom. You left one form of corruption to a different form of corruption, and that led you to make a decision, which also your parents wanted to make that decision too, which is to leave and that
Yeah,
form
so
of
this
corruption.
we had offers to come to the States. We had offers to go to Australia. My father, your grandfather, had a ticket. He has a ticket. He was an engineer in Poland, so he was asked to go to South Africa. We were given a house. We were given a swimming pool and the workers and astronomical amounts of money just to come to South
So at
Africa.
that time, to explain for people, at that time, the system of immigration actually worked. It was actually
Yes.
working where it was countries seeking to recruit people that are going to make their country better, that are actually going to contribute to society, to their society. And countries were looking for these types of people to bring in to actually build their economy, to build their way of life. They wanted people that had similar values to their own, and they wanted people that were going to actually contribute, that were actually hardworking people. And at that time, they came different countries through the embassy, or however that system worked for you. They came to you with offers. They came to grandpa to your dad with offers, and they came to you with offers because you had a successful business to come to their countries: United States, Africa, Australia, and Canada.
Yeah, so we had a meeting in the Canadian embassy, and the officer that was interviewing us, I'll never forget this. He said, "Sal," because he knew you had to disclose everything you're doing and how much you have and what you have, and he says, "Sell everything you have. Come to Canada. Canada is the freest country on earth, and in Canada, no one will ever persecute you for your faith." And so, after the meeting, we decided that okay, this is the way to go. We wanted a fresh start. We didn't want to deal with the corrupted police. We didn't want to deal with corrupted politicians. You got to remember, Nathaniel, I was very well off. I knew everyone. I did a house for the chief of police. I had my friends were very famous singers in Greece, the Bouzoukia, the lifestyle, the restaurant, the money that was flowing. Life was good. At times, I had over 100 employees working for me, including Greek people. I was building huge houses, very expensive villas for the rich Athenians. But the one ingredient that we really, really wanted was missing. That is total freedom from corruption. And that's exactly why we emigrated to Canada. We had a friend here that lived in Calgary, Alberta, and he said, Canada is awesome. It's amazing. The government doesn't care. You pay taxes. You're free. You can start business. There will be no police visiting you asking for an envelope. There will be no crooked politicians that will always look to steal from you. Taxes were at that time, again, we're talking about 30 years ago, taxes were relatively okay. The Canada, it seemed like the right place to emigrate, and it took us 5 years to do the paperwork. We had to go through the medical. We were self sponsored because we had the money that we moved from Europe to Canada. What else? We had to go through criminal records, tons of paperwork, and for all of us, it took me to get your mom a year and a half. So it was
So it
not.
wasn't you were just simply invited, handed government checks and an apartment in New York City, and you were just told, "Here, come in. You don't have to do anything. You just here handouts."
Yeah, well, if I'm joking right now, if we knew that the only thing we needed was to show up at the southern border and we would get $100,000 a year, an apartment or a hotel and a cell phone, I think that's the way we would go. No, when we arrived here, I had to go to work right away because to sponsor your mom, I had to be employed. If I didn't have the paper that I am actually working, even though I had the money, but I had to go to work. And I remember I just took the first job there was, $6 per hour. It was a joke. I was making so much money, and suddenly I had to work for some person for $6 per hour. Well, but I did it. I did it because we wanted to reunite. I wanted your mom to come, and it took a year and a half for this to happen. And then quickly I started to work within the construction. I wanted to open a restaurant, but plans changed, and I went back into construction. I started a stucco business. Then I've done other businesses as well, and then eventually we started building houses again, just like I did in Greece, and we were quite successful. But everything changed, and I don't know if you want to leave this for the next episode. Everything changed when you were born. I mean, actually, my whole life was flipped upside down when I, for the first time, realized that this American dream, if you will, or money, or pursuit of money, Solomon calls chasing after the wind. So the things that you want to possess, the things that you dream about, are not it. That there are other things that are more important than a house, a car, a bank account, a
So
career.
so no happiness under complete and utter tyranny and corruption. No happiness in this free, more free, um, El Dorado, as you called it, but still some corruption. And then no happiness in what used to be a very free, capitalist, rich country In all three of those places that you lived, there was no happiness, and that was because there was something missing.
That's right. It
And
was
it wasn't
something.
me. It wasn't my birth to to clarify. That wasn't me. That was that was God. That was Jesus Christ.
That's exactly that's the your birth. I mean, you were born dead and without a lung and smashed upper chest, and I'll never forget this. I'll never forget. I mean, I watched you come out, and you were purple. You were lifeless. You I will never forget the face of your mom, her big eyes, knowing something is really, really wrong. And I'll never forget the doctor and his panic. He was running around calling some numbers, calling nurses, other doctors. Everyone is running because you were born lifeless. But I think that's another story.
For
What
yeah,
really
for
changed
those
me?
of you for those of you that don't know that story of me being born dead, and really my dad's testimony as to why he does what he does for the Lord, you can go to the movie, the documentary called Street Advocate. That's on YouTube. It's free. You can just watch it. It's not very long, but it explains everything. There's medical records, there's footage, there's
Well, I got
pictures,
it.
there's
I got it right
X-rays.
here. I got three books from Children's Hospital in Calgary explaining what happened to you. I've got a number of X-rays and your bowels up and the whole thing.
Yeah, so
Smart.
if you wanna know, if you wanna learn about that miracle of God and the transformation of my dad to actually serve Christ and to become a Christian, you can watch Street Advocate. Just type in Street Advocate into YouTube and you'll find it. Street Advocate, the movie. But for now, because that's such a long story, we can save that for another episode. I want to skip that part and just get to the part where you're saved, you're a Christian, God called you out of what you were doing, called you out of your business to serve him full time, to leave everything behind, like the Israelites leaving Egypt, leaving everything behind and just serving Jesus full time, which is what you do now and what you have been doing for nearly what, 25 years now. 20,
Yeah. So
23 years or so.
first,
So go through that, and then and
you
then
don't want
we'll
to
and then
save
I'll
this. You don't want to save this for part two. I think um,
Well,
the
we'll
reason.
we'll quickly wrap up a little bit how it got to the point where you were sought after by the government and you started to be persecuted, and then we'll leave the rest for next time. There's so many stories. There's so much to say. We're already at an hour and a half, and I
Well,
knew
that's
this one
why.
would possibly this one might be a little bit longer. When we actually talk about certain things, and again, if you want to comment, we have hundreds of people watching right now on all the platforms. If you want us to talk about something specifically, leave it in the comments, and we'll try to address whatever. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have ideas, what we can talk about for episodes or installments or whatever that is, just comment it, and perhaps we'll be able to address that or talk about that. But I want to just kind of, in a nutshell, who you are as a person, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. We kind of walk through your history, our family, our kind of collective history as a family and what we endured in Europe. But now you're in Canada and you've been doing something for 25 years. And what is it that you're doing?
Yeah. So when we emigrated to Canada, I was sitting on a fence. What I mean by this was your typical Western focus on money, typical Christian. I call it half baked or lukewarm, pick your choice. I was going to church because of your mom. Your mom was a born again believer. She was always telling me about this God. I grew up in Catholicism, which was controlled by the state. And I had a very bad experience with organized crime, as I call it, religious crime organizations. So I vowed in Greece never ever to enter a church building. I find this now funny. I'm a pastor right now, but I vowed never ever enter a church building because of what I saw under Catholicism, under communism. So I even end up in monastery. I was thinking of becoming a priest, and I really, really wanted to serve God. I just didn't know how to serve God, because the only way we were told that you can actually serve God is if you become a priest. So I went to the monastery. I was an altar boy. I was the young man that was reading the Bible in during the mass. I've done it all. I went on pilgrimages. I've kissed every feet of Jesus everywhere. I bowed. I went on my knees. I was laying flat on concrete. I was chastising myself. I've done everything to come closer to God. And I realized, and I saw the corruption, and I realized that this whole thing is just hypocrisy. That organized religion is not bringing you closer to God, is just manipulating and controlling you. And I didn't want to be controlled. I didn't want to be manipulated. And also, I didn't want to end up a hypocrite that is doing this. I was thinking I wanted to do this for the right reason, but I couldn't serve God. I had to be within the system that was very corrupted. So anyway, I walked away from that, and then I met your wife, your mom, and your mom was a very devoted believer, and she was telling me about this God. And I was rejecting it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it because of my experience. But the power of women. Ladies, if I'm telling you, you're the most powerful outside of God, you're the most powerful force that there is. Literally.
That's
I've never,
actually what mom's influence on you is actually a huge a huge miracle, huge ministry, because yeah, women have enormous power when it comes to dealing with men. However, there's a statistic that I saw that when a man of the house becomes Christian, then there's I think it's like 75% chance. I could be butchering this statistic, but I'm gonna be lowballing it. I think it's 75% chance that the rest of the household will also turn Christian. But when a woman turns Christian, there's only like a again, I'm gonna be fair and lowball. Let's say there's like a 5% chance only, or like 11% chance that the rest of the household will turn Christian. So it's a miracle that mom's influence on you actually did something. And that's not just her doing, that's the Holy Spirit. That's the miracle of the gospel. And the reason why you're doing what you're doing today, and what I grew up, I didn't witness a father or a man who was a businessman, that, like you've been telling the audience now, the businessman or the fighter who was opposing communism, or the person living in Greece, or like that. That's not who I knew as a father, because since I've been alive, since I remember you, you were a born again believer, and your life is, when I hear the stories of your life, that's not the same person that I know, because Christ radically changed your life. You're a new like clearly a new creation, because the stories I hear, and hopefully we'll be able to get into a little bit of that, and all these crazy stories. I mean, the stories I grew up from grandma and grandpa and everyone else who knew you, about you, smuggling things in Greece and smuggling in Turkey, and gold and alcohol, running this stuff in Eastern Europe under communism, carrying a gun with you, like all this stuff, getting caught in prison and escaping out of prison. I don't, somewhere in Europe, I think that was Czechoslovakia, that you escaped from prison. These are insane stories of a person who's no longer alive, because Jesus completely changed you as a human being. You're not the same person. And what I want to do is introduce the audience to the man that is now, who was that person who encountered these crazy things in his life, who's gone through what can be described as hell on earth, and to now be a pastor and a person who's been doing ministry for 25 years. I've done missions work with you. I've seen you in action in Africa, working with these orphans, or in the clinics in Africa, or with the kids in Belize and Barbados. Um, I want people to understand that this is what you do full time, and that's because of one thing. That's because of Jesus. That's because of an influence in your life that's supernatural, that nothing could have done from your, that couldn't have been you. That wasn't you because you were transformed so radically. Um, so we'll skip the testimony part for another episode, but when you started to do ministry, when God took you out of business, out of the land of Egypt and slavery, and you became a born again believer filled with the Holy Spirit, you started to do ministry, something happened. And you started to actually take the word of God, take the church outside of four walls. And then what happened? What were you met with?
Well, our first homeless man that we took off the streets was Hook. His name was Hook, and he spent 7 years in a dumpster in the city of Calgary. If you know anything about Calgary, you know that we have minus 30, minus 40, sometimes even minus 50. And he spent 7 years. I remember meeting him. His first name was Marian. His last name was Hook. Marian Hook. He was an alcoholic, a wreck, a completely destroyed man. And I really felt that God wanted me to pick him up and help him. So I hired him into my company, and he was the worst worker I've ever witnessed in my life. I mean, it was a disaster, but I kept him because that was my way of giving back to God for how he radically changed my life. And a miracle started to happen. He stopped drinking. We rented an apartment for him. We were giving him food. We bought a ticket for him to go to Poland. He was a Polish man. And for the first time, he saw his grandkids since he emigrated. Like, he never saw his grandkids. And this is a man that spent 7 years in a dumpster. I remember his stories. He said a number of times when he was sleeping in a dumpster, he barely escaped being destroyed when he jumped out when they came to pick up the trash. And I remember when he was crying, telling me one story that one day he jumped out of the garbage bin, but he was not able to catch or grab his hat. And he started to cry because this hat was everything he had. Crazy stuff. So we started to look, into this craziness of homelessness, because, Nathaniel, I never thought that there are homeless people in America. I thought that America is so rich that everyone can go to work and manage to have a house, and the American dream, right? I was very naive as a Christian. I was very naive as a businessman. I thought that this is you know, this country has no corruption and it's all beautiful and good, and the good people that are running shelters and taking care of the homeless. I thought the politicians actually are serving us, not working against us, trying to tax us to death. So, but that was 1999. And then I started to take more homeless people, and then I'll take them to dinners. I would pick them up and help them and hire them, and that was going on for 6 years until
And this
2005.
was after you received a clear directive from God to leave the business
No,
and
that was
to do the
before.
ministry.
That was before. That was 1999 when we started to work with the homeless people. The season or the timeline you're talking to was 2005, when I had an office in the most prestigious place. It was called Bankers Hall. It's still here. My office was in front of the consulate of Mexico. I was eating in the best restaurants, making $5,000 a day. We made millions of dollars on land transactions. So we had 7 houses and land, and I was
So this
golfing
is
all the
this is
time.
important. So before you received a clear directive to leave the business and to get into full-time ministry, before you received that directive, you still already, after being saved, felt some kind of pull to work for God, to do some good, to help out, but there was still something that was not entirely there.
Yeah, I was doing it part time. And if you know anything about me, you know that I am not capable of doing anything part time. I'm either in or out. And even, your mom, my wife, drives her crazy because women are multi. They can watch a
Multitasking.
movie, write a book, do whatever, and take care of 10 children. You give me one task. Please don't give me anything else. or I crumble. I have to focus on one thing. So I was very good as a businessman, very good. I made millions of dollars a year. I bought properties, I sold, I had multiple companies. I owned a magazine that was very successful, the best magazine, the best new magazine in the province. I was very good at focusing on business. But here suddenly it was this side thing that was emerging, which was the homelessness. What did I know about homeless people? Really, not much. I tasted poverty, true, but I was never a homeless man. So I didn't know the environment. I didn't know what they're going through. I knew what poverty means or how it tastes, but they didn't know in America how you deal with homeless people. So it was a training ground. I did it part time. I did it once a week as a kind of a funny, nice kicker addition to my life. And my life was doing good, and I wanted to give something back. I was very generous to the church, and I was funding different things. And I never had a problem to write a check for something or be generous, if you will. But 2005, that changed because um, we've decided I've heard a clear direction from God that it's time to do it full time. And when I've heard this clear direction, Nathania, I knew that I am a missing potential. I knew how to fix the problem. I knew how to do more than I was doing, but I couldn't because I was involved in business, clients and meetings and buildings and employees and, you know, subcontractors. All those different things were taking most of my time. And once a week, I would give few hours to the community, to the poor, to the church. So 2005, I decided to really, really look deep into the problem of homelessness, and I realized that I can really be successful in organizing something that would help the people. Of course, I didn't know, Nathaniel, at that time what I would be dealing with. I didn't know the enormous corruption. I didn't know that the politicians do not want to fix the problem of homelessness. They are creating homelessness. I didn't know at that time that the shelters are selling drugs to the people that they house, receiving, of course, millions upon millions of dollars from the government. It's a revolving door, it's a perpetual business. I didn't know that stuff. I was just a young guy that wanted to do some good, and I knew how to do it. So I went to the streets and I did it the best I could. I did it with a testimony, I did it with God, and I did it with food and halfway housing. At that time, we had a few houses, halfway housing. We were taking people off the streets. Within 3 months, we took 600 people off the streets. And believe it or not, instead of getting a medal from the city of Calgary or the province of Alberta, I got my first tickets. But that's a very complex story. And I would say to you,
It
I
is.
create
We'll
this.
leave that. We'll leave that for another time. But I quickly researched what what um what Artur Pawlowski was first, what his first run-ins with the law were, and uh, this brings me to an important thing that I always say whenever I'm speaking anywhere, and that's my dad's, Artur Pawlowski's story. As most people know, it started with COVID, and in reality, this is a long, complicated story where there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of background information. For example, when I was 6 years old, I guess my earliest memory of my dad's run-ins with the law was when he was arrested in 2006 for reading the Bible to like six people, no amplification or breaking any laws, in a public park, and he was arrested for that. And when you explain this to people, it's like, oh, well, clearly he was doing something wrong. Like, no, he was not doing anything wrong, and that's proven with the court records because he was acquitted. He was six, I believe. There were 5 or 6 criminal charges. Anyone can research this stuff. The court records are publicly available. 5 or 6 criminal charges for reading the Bible in a public park. I believe the case is out of 2009, and he was acquitted. So the politicians and the police arrested him, unlawfully arrested him, charged him, went dragged him through court, and he was acquitted. And it was all because he read the Bible in public
Yeah.
in a free and
Yeah.
democratic country.
My first ticket was 2005, and it was a shocker to me because when I came to Canada, I already explained why we emigrated to this country, because of its constitution, because of freedom, because I could actually run a business without bribing police and politicians, and that's how we wanted. We wanted to pay taxes and be left alone. Um, I was absolutely shocked. I mean, to this day, I am still shocked in a way, 20 years later, when the bylaw services and the police officers came to me in hell. We started our ministry in front of drop-in center in a park called the Needle Park, a triangle park, but it
Yeah,
was
so I
called,
remember. I actually remember. I was young, but I remember this park, and it was a common place where the homeless would hang out, kind of like, Hastings Street, if you've
that's
heard
right,
of that. And it was like, pop-up tents, needles everywhere,
city's
broken glass
ghetto.
everyone, alcohol everywhere, prostitutes, a really dangerous place, not a place where a normal child should go. And my mom would frequently, um, not allow me to go. But a few times I went, and these images I think are very important because it was the worst possible place in the entire city, possibly the province. And you had a guy with a red pickup truck and a cross on this red pickup truck, and he was preaching the gospel and giving people sandwiches. And instead of praising a person like this, the police, the politicians, and the media attacked him and actually arrested him. And we'll get into all this for another
It's
episode.
a fascinating story because it explains the level of corruption we're dealing with, and that ties to my imprisonment time in Remand Center, Psych Ward, and all those different things during the latest attack on our liberties. But it's very important to understand that Canada has not fallen overnight. It was not like a sudden thing. We were not invaded by Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong, and then, oops, we are in this totalitarian regime. This happened gradually, uh, with the involvement of corrupted judges, corrupted politicians, corrupted law enforcement agencies, and highly corrupted propaganda machinery that in 2004 and 2005 labeled me a hero. And I know it's hard to believe right now that Artur
Mainstream media.
mainstream media elevated me to a position of a hero. Street church growing on the streets, businessman leaves business to save lives. I mean, I was viewed as the hero of Canada. I was applauded. I had media, TV. They did interviews with me left and right until the moment I started to be very, very successful in taking the homeless people off the streets.
A
Then
little too successful.
too successful. You know, if you're doing a little bit of good, you're good. If you're too successful, suddenly someone somewhere, of course, I didn't know that at that time, but someone somewhere is losing millions of dollars. That's where the mayor of the city of Calgary got involved. That's where the aldermen started to get involved, attorney
Politicians
general.
politicians themselves got involved in the life of some little street preacher that was just trying to take people off the streets. That's the story. That's what people don't understand, and what we
Yeah.
do have to explain to people. And I think we'll go into a lot of more detail if people
And
want to hear.
at that time, Nathaniel, I was not Artur Pawlowski that opposed the regime. I was called a pizza preacher. Why? So a nobody. We were literally nobodies. They call us pizza preachers because we would chip in. Literally, we would pass a hut and we would chip in to buy pizzas. And we would not have, like right now, it's a full soup kitchen, and we got what, 7 tables set up every week, and it's truckloads of food and all that stuff worth millions of dollars that is being distributed to the poor. At that time, we were literally having 10 pizzas, 20 pizzas, 50 pizzas. Then it grew to 120 pizzas. And if you start adding the numbers of money that were needed to buy all of this stuff, suddenly it created a big problem. And we were called pizza preachers. And it was Monty Peterson. You remember Monty? It was him that came to me and says, Pastor, it doesn't make any sense with this pizza business, because the more, yeah, you're getting more pizzas every week. However, there's more people every week, and it's not enough for everyone.
It's just not
let
economical.
let me bring a barbecue. And it's funny, Nathaniel, but I was the one that said no. I actually said it doesn't make any sense. I don't want to end up in some trouble with the city. But he was very persistent. Monty, Monty is very stubborn. And he says, listen, Art, I'll bring everything, I'll buy everything. Let me show you how this will change your life and it will benefit the poor. And finally, I gave in and said, fine, this is on you. You bring, show it to me. And that's where those huge lineup started to form, because everyone loved
The rest is history. Next time
barbecue, right?
I'll try to bring actual I'll show pictures and videos of what the setup looks like, because we have a lot of international listeners and viewers, and I want them to actually kind of get a visual of what it is that you used to do with pizzas, because we have all the footage, we have all the videos and pictures, and what you do now and the comparison of that. And it is interesting that little pizza preacher got in so much trouble just because he was being too effective at getting homeless people off the streets. It's what
Yeah.
was it?
Why?
Was it Denzel Washington that said, "If the devil ignores you, then you're doing something wrong."
Yeah. Why? You have to understand that this is a multi-billion-dollar business. Homelessness, it's a huge business. Remand Center, so
The prison.
prisoners, prisoner system, it's a huge multi-billion-dollar business. Healthcare system, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. So I didn't know that at that time. I was very naive. I started to interfere with some big shots that were losing literally millions of dollars. I was told that average addict, a homeless person, spends about $100 to $1,000 a day. That's why they have to resell. They sell drugs. That's why homeless people are selling drugs, just to be able to buy what they need for themselves. So average homeless person spends $100 to $1,000 on drugs. If you multiply this by 600 people that we took off within 3 months, that's millions of dollars that someone started to lose. I didn't know who that was. We find out later it was actually the drop-in center supervisor over there. That was this big kingpin that was selling drugs to the people that they were helping. But we didn't know that at that time. I didn't know that the government is involved in this. What I knew is that they are designating $1 billion, usually about $350,000, $350 million a year, just in the province of Alberta to fight, in quote, homelessness. So it's a lot of background story, a lot of things. But one thing I want to finish with, Nathaniel, why we're feeding the poor, because that's very important. We could just stick with the gospel. We could just bring the cross and blast the speakers and
But you
share
have been
testimonies.
wildly criticized for bringing food. Some people call it like taking advantage of these
That's right.
poor people, that you're manipulating them by feeding them. And if that's their actual perspective, then they haven't opened their Bible in a very long time. There must be like that much of dust on their Bible, because that's not what you see in the Bible.
Of course, we are to feed the poor, take care of the orphans and the widows. I mean, that's a given. But why? Why do we feed the poor? Why we have decided to feed them? Because of their stories. They were coming to us every day and they would accuse us of preaching fake love. And I was shocked. I just didn't know what they were talking about. Pastor, you're preaching love, but we're hungry. I said, how? Why are you hungry? We're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to feed you every year.
In
Every
taxes.
year in taxes and government fundings.
Charities.
And every day you've got those organizations asking for additional few dollars from the public for a meal. So I asked them, why are you hungry? Well, they're not feeding us, they're not giving us food. And I would see truckloads, literally huge truckloads, like semi trucks, coming to the facilities, unloading lobsters, unloading steaks, unloading different things. And then I would ask the homeless people, wow, you had a lobster today. Oh, what? We've never seen a lobster. Oh, you had steaks today. No, what? We've never had a steak. Chickens came. What? We never had a chicken. We had a pasta without anything on it, without the sauce. And then I went inside the facility to find out for myself. And I went there multiple times and I documented it. I took pictures, I took videos that those people were being robbed, that they truly were not being fed. That's why we decided to feed them, because at the beginning it was just a pizza slice. You don't have to be hungry. Everyone loves pizza. Hey, here is a slice. But when we realized that this is a bigger problem than just giving them a slice of pizza, that those people are literally hungry. The testimonies were like, Pastor, we did not eat for 3 days. I said, what? You are in the facility that we pay hundreds of millions of dollars to, and you were not fed? No. And then, of course, the rapes and abuse of power in those facilities, that's another story. I end up in a huge trouble and in a court for exposing the level of corruption and abuse of power, criminal abuse of power in those facilities. But let's save that for another episode.
Yeah, I want to get to one last point, and that is you're doing this, and we'll get into the specifics of all that you do because you feed the homeless 3 times a week, volunteers. Some of the most amazing people on earth are the volunteers that I see at this, what you call street church, which is a name that you received from God to call it street church because it's a church that goes onto the streets. And at the street church, you actually feed the homeless 3 times. It used to be 4 times, but there's just too much going on. You also do a church in a building 2 times a week. You also do missions work, and this is all without a charitable tax status. I believe it's called C4 something in the United States, but you had yours revoked. And again, I did some research on why yours was revoked. And it is because you were engaged in political activity. However, they did not cite any political activity. They cited the Bible. They cited moral principles that you talked about, and for that you got your charitable status revoked in 2008. That was a very long time ago, and you have been operating since 2008 without receiving without being able to receive donations in which you can give a charitable tax break to the people that are donating. As you know, getting that kind of charity receipt is a huge incentive to give any kind of money. You had yours revoked in 2008 for speaking about, and again, you can do your own research, for speaking about abortion, homosexuality, and divorce. Those three
The,
things the CRA actually cited in their letter to you in revoking. The CRA is the Canada Revenue Agency. They actually cited those 3 things for the reasoning in revoking your charitable tax status. And
Actually, the letter states that because I speak negatively. So if I was speaking positively, that would be a different story. But the letter said that because I speak negatively about abortion, homosexuality, and
and you've
divorce.
posted that letter on the website. Is that that's
Yeah,
still up?
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it
So,
was it was widely covered by. At that time, the media were not as corrupted as they are today. This story was on National Post, which is like a national newspaper, and other media outlets. It was a very well known story, and the intended intention for taking the charitable tax status actually worked, because from that year I've lost majority of my donors, and even the people that loved me and they loved what we're doing told me, well, listen, you cannot give me a charitable tax status, a receipt, a charitable receipt, therefore I will no longer be able to donate to your ministry. So one after another, I lost all my supporters. That's why, Nathaniel, you suffered, and Gabriel, your brother, and your sister, because we couldn't afford the things that other parents could afford. We couldn't send you places. We couldn't do stuff with you. I had to sell my properties, which we
So
did. So the
I,
first
I
few
want
years,
I want to address that before you move on. This is a person, and this isn't going to be a show where I'm just like patting you on the back. I'm going to push back against, where I'm a different person, you're a different person, we
no,
have
no, and
different
that's fine.
ideas,
That's perfectly
and
fine with
iron
me.
iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
However, in this case, I want to applaud you as a father, because you're someone who taught me priorities, biblical priorities. This is a man who had priorities straight. And the world will tell you that the priorities, when you're a family man, when you're a person with a family, should be, your kids, your wife, your business, roof over their heads. And of course, that's biblical things. You must take care of your family. You must provide for them, or else you're as bad as an unbeliever, the Bible said. However, the priority list actually goes God number one, and then the work you do, the mission work, the Great Commission, which is to go out into all the world. Those are the priority. Those are the top two on the list. And you're somebody who had to prioritize that, and maybe God was teaching you that. I'm not sure his reasoning. I'm not going to speak for him, but you had to prioritize God and your work that you do for God, even above your wife and even above your children. And yeah, me and my siblings maybe didn't have as much as the other kids at school, or we couldn't participate in the same ways. I still think I had a very blessed childhood, and God was very gracious and merciful to us. However, you proved that as a man, there's a priority list, and on that priority, number one is God and what you do for him, for his kingdom. Seek first the kingdom of God, the Bible says, and everything else will be added to you. And God clearly did add to you, because we're fine. I mean, I'm studying to be a lawyer. My brother is studying to be a pilot. My sister's going to be possibly studying to be a teacher. God rewarded and blessed, because you did not compromise, and you did not go, you know what, I have a mortgage, my kids need to, be put in soccer camp, or whatever. They need to have more toys. I'm gonna just do more work. I'm gonna do more construction, more business, so that they're suffering less. No, you did not compromise like that. You put everything that you had, you put into ministry, into feeding the homeless, preaching the gospel, doing missions work, and taking care of the people that Jesus specifically told us to take care of: the prisoners, the orphans, the widows, the poor people. And 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 again, going back to that charitable tax status, is they revoked it in an attempt to hurt you, in an attempt that people would stop supporting you, so that you would stop doing what you're doing, because you can't do what you're doing without funds. You can't do it. And that's why we're promoting this book, Lions Do Not Bow, because we need the funds to continue fighting. And God uses people. God gives through his people. He uses his church and his people to be a blessing to each other. And that's why we're promoting this book, Lions Do Not Bow. It's a double-edged sword. It's to help people, it's to empower people, it's to embolden them, and to encourage them, to give them hope that you survived these atrocities, and all these horrible things that were done to you. But you came out of it a victor, not a victim, because you did it with God on your side. And at the same time, it's also to raise funds, because doing ministry, and in doing and fighting in all these court cases and everything, this costs an enormous amount of money. I mean, lawyers, $50,000 for a good lawyer. I think it's thievery in their rates, but that's just the nature of the system. And this takes money, and this food is not free. This work is not free. Gas is not free. And in a system of oppression, where all this inflation and this heavy boot that's trying to crush us, we need the support of people even more. We need help. and no man can do this alone. And prayers are so important. We need people to be praying and lifting us up in prayer, because that's most important. um so I find it very fascinating that they always go after funds. The
Always. I'll tell you why. Again, I love history. I love to teach history. I learned so much from history. And you can be the best warrior that there is. You can be the unbeatable army that there is, that never lost a fight. But if you lose a support line, a lifeline, the
supply
supply
line.
lines, just like what happened to Adolf Hitler when he invaded Russia, just what happened to Bonaparte, unbeatable army, but lost because the supply lines were cut off. So the enemy knows the tactics. You can be a really great warrior, but if you don't have the funds, you will be destroyed, even based on technicalities. I mean, if you cannot afford a lawyer that can send a stupid paper, well, you're going to lose the fight because based on technicality. During that time, it was a very difficult time. I had to sell our properties. We had houses, we had properties, the golf. I had to stop golfing, which I didn't for many years now. And I remortgaged our house, the house you were growing up. I remortgaged 7 times. Every year, I would come to my wife and said, "I have to do it again." Every year for 7 years, I had to remortgage our house and take more and more and more because we were not receiving the funds. And even today, we a majority of the things we give, food, we receive by donations from different organizations, from different private people. However, to run street church ministry, it's 20 to $25,000 a month, and just that, those are just the minimum. I'm not talking about my salary. Is I'm not
Just
taking a penny.
expenses.
This is just the operational cost that you need to run the business, the charity that feeds so many people. You need trucks, you need gasoline, you need
And if
refrigeration.
people want to know where those funds are going, if you just go and search up your name, you'll see exactly where those funds are going. You'll see on your social media where those funds are going. I like that you post sometimes hundreds of pictures of food, of the people eating the food, of the preaching, of the cross on the streets of this frigid city. And you regularly, weekly, you post pictures of exactly where people's money are going. They're
Yeah,
going directly into ministry. They're going directly, you're sowing into the lives of people that are dying, that actually need help, both spiritually and physically. And it's an incredible thing. And people, like you said, they need the supply line. People need that. And it's fascinating that everything, if you want to kind of sum up their strategy, the enemy's strategy of what they've been trying to do, is to absolutely bankrupt you, is to is
yeah.
to is
Few
to
things. Divide and conquer. So turn supporters against you, muddy the waters. Like, of course, you were still here when there was a circulating story that I kidnapped your mom when she was 7 years old. Well, those crazy things. We are the same age, as you know. I met your
I
mom.
have in fact, seen both of their birth certificates and licenses and passports, and they
I
were
mean,
in
it's
fact
a
both born in 1973.
it's a
But rumors
ridiculous,
rumors are dangerous.
a ridiculous
Rumors
story.
spread.
But
Gossip.
this,
That's why gossip is so heavily talked about in the Bible.
but rumors, gossip, uh, all of those things, they have a purpose: to muddy the waters, to remove the supply line, to stop someone from otherwise would be supporting the mission. But hey, you've kidnapped your wife when she was 7 years old. I don't want to have anything to do with a crazy pedophile like that, right? So they don't ask questions. They don't come and ask, "Hey, show me your passport, show your wife's passport." I would show it. I have nothing to hide. I mean, it's a public record. It's nothing here to hide. Talk to my wife. She preaches from time to time. Ask her, right? But no, the tactic is very straightforward. Muddy the waters. People are lazy. They hear something and they have tendency to believe it, or they are too lazy to find out the truth. Therefore, they withdraw their support. Also, when you are not able to give them trinkets, if you're not able to give them the charitable tax receipt, well, they will give to somebody else because they can get something out of it. So the charity right now, the idea of I'm giving to God without expecting anything in return, is pretty much lost in the West. Most people are giving because they want something in return. They go to churches because they're being entertained in those churches. They go to certain pastors because those pastors are entertaining them. So it's like going to a movie theater. I'm willing to give you $100 if the food is good and the entertainment is awesome. If you sing nice songs, I'm willing to chip in an extra few dollars as a tip. That's the Christianity of today. But a hardcore truth, a hard work, freezing -40, +30, those are the things that most people don't want to have anything to do with. And Nathaniel, you got to remember there's always a price that a real believer has to pay. It costs the father the life of his son, it costs the son his own life, his own blood. He was crucified on the cross. And in the Bible, Jesus says, pick up your what? Gluten-free donut and a coffee, Tim Hortons or Starbucks. No, pick up your cross daily and follow me. That means there will be a seasons of difficulties. There will be
And if you look
seasons
at
of
the
struggle.
apostles, they also lost everything. They were told to sell everything and to just follow, and they were also dragged before authorities, shipwrecked, beaten, naked.
There goes the
All the
prosperity gospel idea.
I
God loves
believe
you
that
as
God,
a
of course,
God, of
God wants us to prosper. Of course, God wants
course.
us to do well and to be wealthy and to do well with that wealth. I mean, Jesus specifically talked about that. Use your wealth.
That's
Use
right.
your wealth. He says, even the unbelievers know how to use their wealth and make friends, but you guys are useless. You're not shrewd like the unbelievers are. And we are to do well, but that does not mean that you're always going to be living this beautiful, perfect, comfortable life that has no difficulties, because every follower of Jesus, true follower of Jesus, will tell you otherwise. And if you look in the Bible, I can't find a single disciple or apostle that just lived a comfortable life. They were brutally murdered, or they were exiled, or beaten, or dragged before the authorities in the courts. And a lot of people, they have the attitude that, well, if you're going through all this and you have problems and run-ins with the law, that means you're doing something wrong. Or if you're poor, you're doing something wrong. Well, that's not biblical. That's not anywhere in the Bible. In fact, the opposite is true. Oftentimes, that is just the reality of the calling. You're going to have troubles. You're going to have persecution. And in fact, if you're not being persecuted, you're probably doing something wrong, because Jesus promises persecution. So if you're not being persecuted, and persecution does not mean a negative Facebook comment. Persecution means persecution. It means you're actually being persecuted for your faith, for what you're doing as a believer. And certainly you've seen that in your life. And that's just a reality of being a true follower of Christ.
I think you touched on these priorities. I think we've lost as a church in the West, we've lost priorities. God is kind of like a cherry on top of the cake of our lives, instead of, He is the cake and we are the cherry on the top. He's everything. And it starts with Him, and there's a lots of dust in between and ends with Him. We've lost that concept. Also, it's seasons. Not always you're going to go through difficulties and hardship. You may face persecution for a season, and God is going to give you victory, and you go from glory to glory, from victory to victory. I have been prosecuted and persecuted for many years. However, I have my moments of victories, seasons of abundance, seasons of going on a vacation and being able to travel and go on missions and do other things, organize festivals, which we've done in many countries, and marches for Jesus, and all those different things. So even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will fear no evil. Why? Because God is with you and you walk through difficulties. The worst thing that can happen to a believer is to be stuck in a valley. Don't stay in a valley. Don't whine and complain that you are in a valley. Walk through the valley, and the sooner the better. Keep running if you need to, but go through the valley, because on the other side is your victory. And we must understand that the enemy is doing everything in their power to destroy God's perfect will in our lives, and he's using people. Unfortunately, there's a lots of people that are blind and are deaf, and they have zero discernment. They don't know what's really going on. So read the Bible. I say quite often as a joke, but it's actually not a joke, that I'm a little bit a weirdo, if you will. I'm a different pastor. I actually read the Bible. I don't buy my sermons on internet. I study the Bible. I read verses. I sometimes meditate on a sermon for a week. And today, all day, I was just sitting in front of the computer and going through the sermon. I was changing it. I was trying to find out, God, what is the main reason? What is the main meat, if you will, for this message you're giving to the people? Because in the end is life and death in a tongue. There's power. Whatever we're saying here, it can build someone or it can destroy someone, can put someone down. And I think that's why it's so important. And that's why I wrote the book in prison, because the story of Artur Pawlowski is not the story of look what horrible things they have done to this man and this family. No, that's not the story. Look what a mighty things the Lord has done for Artur Pawlowski and his family. I mean, look, you just said it. My son is becoming a lawyer. I was called by the media advocate, street advocate. So I was never able, I studied law for 3 years. I was never able to actually finish it, you know, but my son is able to do it. Thank you, Jesus. Another son, I remember I was flying little Cessnas when I was still in the business. I would fly other people with me and it was fun, but I was never able to go beyond that. My son, second son, Gabriel, is starting to be a pilot. He's flying solo. How cool is that? And then I love to teach, and God is blessing our daughter, Maya. She is just finished grade 10, so she still has a few years to go, but she has a desire to be a teacher. We need good, godly teachers
And
against
that's
this
that's
world.
something we can touch on in another episode, but that's a very important topic, which is getting involved in the spheres that we have lost as a nation. Why, as Christians, would we avoid the careers and the paths and the callings that are actually tainted with corruption right now? You should be light in the darkness, not light in more light. You need the light where there's darkness. So, the police force, the judicial system, politics, teaching, the school system is absolutely corrupt right now. You need people to get into that. And we can talk about that more another time. We have gone very over time, but that's normal for first episode. Pray for the direction of this show, of what we're doing as a family, as a ministry, what our church does, what the Church of Jesus Christ is doing, what they're doing regularly. It's not just you. It's not just you as a pastor. It's all the people that are actually participating, volunteering their time,
Yeah,
volunteering their effort and their work. We're one body. We're one church, and when one member of the body hurts, we all hurt.
that's right.
And that's what people should be praying for. If you want to support, there's different ways to help out. Everything that you give goes towards the ministry, goes towards fighting for righteousness. So thank you for listening, and again, please comment if there's anything that you want us to talk about. I'm very excited to be able to talk about history or philosophy, different current events that are going on in the world, the Bible, what's going on. I think we do need to finish your story and kind of what's been going on, because people just don't understand. There's so much to talk about that we can never really flush out everything that needs to be talked about, needs to be addressed, because it's important, because it relates to today and right now. It's relevant now. It's not
Yeah.
just a story. It's actually important to hear about now. So I hope that we can finish the story. You can explain to people why you do what you do, who you are, and why you are the way that you are. And that's really only because of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit's work. So I hope we can do this regularly, and that this will be a blessing for people. And again, we'll keep pulling on that theme that this isn't a rant or a ramble. It's talk about victories, and to talk about how, despite everything, God. And that's important. It's like the story of Job. It's like, despite everything,
Yeah.
God was there. And that's what we're going to try to accomplish. Hopefully this will be encouraging and a blessing. So thank you all for listening, for tuning in, and see you next time.
Goodbye.